welcome to Background Screening Tips and Tech. I'm your host, Tim Santoni, and today we have a very special guest, Greg Hauser, VP Global Talent Acquisition from Ingram Micro, is joining us. Thanks, Greg, so much for joining the show. Maybe before we get started, just share with our listeners a little bit about what you're passionate about and kind of your role and current duties at Ingram.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be a part of your show, and just excited to have the opportunity to chat with you. A little bit about me and passion. I've been in talent acquisition for, going on 20 years, I want to say, I think. You could find out probably on LinkedIn, but I've been in talent acquisition for the majority of my career, started in technology and got into recruiting really by accident. But I'm really passionate when I explain what I do and why I'm passionate about it. I just like solving business problems using manpower and people and connecting people. So if you know me outside of the office, I'm a natural connector. I like getting people to either find something that they're looking for or help them. And that just naturally falls into why I do what I do. And so, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I've solved a lot of business problems and hired a lot of people and have changed lives. That's the other element of what we do. We're able to change somebody's life with a new career opportunity. So a little bit
Gotcha. Well, it's great to have someone on in the HR field to talk a little bit about the challenges and kind of the secret sauce and the things that you've done to bring in the correct people and to have the right processes in place. And I guess the first thing, being in the talent acquisition space, maybe share with us just a little bit about, in the last 12 to 24 months, kind of some of the challenges you've encountered and maybe some of the unique things that you and your team have had to implement or, tried to implement to kind of, overcome the virtual nature of business and the COVID challenges and everything that's gone on.
Absolutely. That's a big question there, Tim. So I'll try my best to cover it. I think if I was to say the biggest trends right now in 2022, which are carryovers from 2021, there's really 5 of them. So it's easy for me to kind of bucket them in this perspective, because then it'll get others thinking about the same. And probably everyone is experiencing the same thing to some extent. Now, I work for Ingram Micro. We're a very large global organization. We have 34,000 full-time associates, and then another 30,000+ part-time or contract associates. It's a big organization. So our challenges are certainly comparable to really anyone in the market of finding talent, and everyone is in that boat of experiencing the market as it is. So, well, the 5, to break it down right now, the number one thing is it's a candidate-led market, right? So what does that mean? It means we're in unprecedented times. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've never seen the market the way it is today. And even if you look at the jobs reports that are coming out on a monthly basis, we're really seeing the lowest unemployment rates in history, right? And not to mention the fact that our world is just growing and opportunity is growing and companies are popping up daily, it seems like. So you could call it the war on talent is just getting harder and harder. We're attracting individuals to come to your organization and work for you when you have 5, 6, 7 opportunities at your fingertips. So it's really a candidate market, and it's up to the employer to figure out how do you attract talent to come to your organization. So what is that? That means then the second bullet is a new focus on brand values. So how are you coming to market about branding your opportunity, branding your company? What makes you successful? Why do people want to work for you? I did a quick video on LinkedIn a while ago talking about that Ingram. To me, the reason I like Ingram Micro, and when I get asked the question, what's the culture like about Ingram Micro? I always lead with, it's a winning culture. And what does a winning culture mean? And it has to do with respect and teamwork and all the values we have. But when you encompass that into an organization and you're doing work that you feel is valuable and contributing, you're going to stay at that organization. You're not going to be driven away by maybe a few extra dollars here or there. But that is a real issue, making sure you're competitive in your market from comp and benefits and everything else. But a new focus on brand and why you're great. That's going to be still a top trend in 2022. Remote working and the ability to live in a hybrid work environment. That's a huge thing. Ingram Micro stances where hybrid work. We do have offices. We returned back to the office, although we've taken precautions to be as safe as possible. And so that's one area of being able to be flexible and meet the talent where they're at. So I would like to see less, relocation for opportunities and more flexible in the workspace. Now, obviously, there are some roles that we have, since we're in logistics, that you have to be in a physical location, right? So, and then our corporate office, we're dealing with the world of Ingram. So being at a corporate office, it's important that we're here. So that's another piece. I would say another bullet would be retention and development. So that kind of falls on your brand awareness. But once you've had your associates, how are you retaining them? How are you, continuing their career aspirations, equipping them to be successful for the future? And so that's every year, but it's very much focused now on making sure your existing associates, number one, feel like they're accommodated appropriately to market, and then as well have opportunities to stay and not be swayed away. And then the last bullet, which is more recruitment focused for your listeners that are in the talent acquisition space, or maybe HR managers, leaders that are looking at, is really taking a look more so and being data driven on our decision making. So, obviously, I know you're focused on background checks and that sort of thing. There is the element of how do you use data to be more effective as an organization, and I think more and more data is really driving our decision making, our practices, and everything else. It's no secret, but if you have a good stronghold over your data and measuring it, you will be more successful as an organization.
Yeah, that's a good point, Greg. So on the data-driven side and looking at, in essence, decision-making analytics, is there certain software or different kind of metrics, or just when you say that, are you leveraging technology to do that so that you can measure how people are performing? Is that kind of what you're getting at, which is how is your retention? How are you keeping people? And what are those things that are causing people to drift off? Give us a little snapshot of what kind of data you are looking at.
Yeah, and we do use some data platforms to help us, whether we're using, a data visualization software, or we're using our HRIS system that has a lot of that, or our recruitment systems that have the built-in reports. Now, granted, we are a large enterprise organization. So if you're a smaller organization and you're saying, well, they have access to all this data, so they can do that. I would argue that there are things you can do with just a basic Excel spreadsheet that will tell you everything you need to know. And you can do the same trends and the same pivots that those big tools do. We just use it at scale because our data is much larger. Our data lake has millions of rows. Maybe yours is only hundreds of rows. So you build to the scale that you're at. And so I would say that we keep it simple. Everything we do, we keep it simple, because everyone has to understand the data. So when I do a report on, for instance, today, I'm going to run a report on our open requisitions. And on that report, it's very basic. It shows you what the opens are. It shows you how long they've been open for. It talks about our candidate funnel. So where are candidates coming from? Where are they in the various stages of the interview process? And it's not just to give you a moment in time, but it helps our business leaders understand, okay, I have these positions open, and I can get an idea of how long it's been taking to fill, or where are my candidates coming from, so I can focus more attention on that area. Or if you're a talent acquisition professional and you're invested in all these job boards, what's giving you the biggest bang for your buck? Where is the talent at? So you don't just keep fishing in the same lake that has no fish, right? And just assuming that you're going to catch one.
Gotcha.
So I think that's probably the best way to put it. I can go into different analytics, but you have such a broad audience. I think you really work with what you have, but keep it simple.
Got it. Yeah, and definitely the most important thing is everyone know what they're looking at and be able to make decisions based on that, so that within the organization, whether you're small, medium, or enterprise organization, that you're on the same page and you can kind of have the information has value. It's not just reports for report's sake that no one's doing anything with. That kind of leads me to the next point, I guess, to look at, the background screening portion of it. So you have this funnel of candidates that are coming in, you have interviewing process, and you have an onboarding process. So, and based on the industry standards and things, the background screening process, both for the kind of the typical criminal background verification and the drug testing, with everything that's been going on, there's definitely been slowdowns in that. So in your experience, how is that? How have you seen those slowdowns, number one? And I guess number two, what have you guys been doing to kind of, work around that or to set expectations?
That's a great question. We have seen some slowdowns in various areas. Now, granted, our business is maybe different than other businesses. We're contractually obligated by some of our vendor partners and even the government when we're working on different areas of our business to run certain checks. And so we're at the mercy of using a third party or multiple third parties to accommodate or to move that process of getting a background check completed. Now there's really no way around it because it is what it is. There are things we need to get done in order for someone to work at Ingram. Now, to complicate things a little bit more, Ingram Micro has taken the stance in the US as it relates to COVID vaccinations that all new hires will need to be fully vaccinated in order to have a position with Ingram at any of our centers. Now, that is a stance of the business. The business stance was put in place for the safety of our associates and was following what was coming down the legislation as it related to some of the mandates. Now, I do know those were struck, obviously in court, but the company is still taking the stance. We're a private organization, and we want to make sure our associates are safe. So we've added that as part of the background check process, which hasn't necessarily slowed down the process. It's just another step. And so what we're seeing is, we're still running probably more screens than we've done in the past. We're hiring more associates as well. We are seeing a little bit more delays. But we're working very closely with our vendor partners just to understand where are those delays coming from and whether or not they're major delays. So for instance, some instances we'll get delays on, education verification or some of the more minor checks that we do. And we might be more lenient to bring on an individual with the understanding that their offer is contingent upon the full completion of the background. But we never will move to that stage if we're looking for something that's a mandatory requirement, whether it's the criminal verification that we need to have done prior to someone joining, and some of the other things that we do, drug tests, for instance. All of that needs to be done regardless. We can't start anyone. But if it's a verification, if it's a reference or something else that's something we can hold until we get confirmed, and then the candidate understands that their employment is conditional based on that. So there's those type of things we've been working through, but at the same time, I think we have a good network of partners we work with across the board that are really there to help us as well to navigate this.
Gotcha. So obviously, I guess my take on it is that communication is key, but I'd love to get your take, which is you have hiring managers and you have recruitment people and you have managers of your service centers and different business units that are looking for people, right? And they need the people quickly. What are you and your team doing to frame and communicate those things so that these delays in any part of your funnel, from recruiting, onboarding to background screening to actually getting them trained and up to speed? What do you find works well to keep them up to speed on any of those delays? And kind of what do you expect from those? I guess selfishly, what is the question? What is the expectation from your vendors and third parties to give you that information? Is it just portal meetings? What do you like to see in order to be able to communicate effectively with your team?
Yeah, we have access to portals. A lot of the technology, you'll know where it's pending, in the process. And so we do it. You're absolutely 1,000% right on communication. In fact, I will say 99% of business problems can be solved with just simple communication at the end of the day. So what does that mean? So our candidates want to know what's going on in the process as well. We have access to what they've submitted, when they submitted it, where it is in the process, and we have our coordinators really working with that individual so that they feel confident and in making the transition, because you got to remember, a lot of times they are subject to putting in their letter of resignation, maybe their 2-week notice. They don't want to go out on the limb just in case something comes back that that they didn't know about. So we're constantly working with them just to make sure and they know where they are in the process and that they feel confident. For instance, like I said, if we're doing a verification of education and yet they have their certificate, they can actually mitigate that or bypass it by sending us a copy, and then we can move forward, right? That's the way we can work around it, but letting them know where we are in the process is certainly very helpful. Same thing is true with our hiring managers, because they're anticipating that once we've got the offer out, they want that person to start yesterday. And you and I know that can't happen, but what we'll do is we'll work with them as far as the same type of communication, where we are in the background check process, what we expect and when we expect to hear back. Our providers do give us an idea of anticipated timelines and turnarounds. We have SLAs in place, which we can anticipate that a full background check will be done within a certain window of time. But if there's any extension, we're just making sure our teams know and they can accommodate effectively. So again, going back to it, basic communication. We're working very closely with the background check provider, the candidate, as well as the manager to make sure this is all happening in a timely manner.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Greg. I think that we get focused on the recruitment and the onboarding and the background screening, all those things from the technical perspective. At the end of the day, I would say what my experience is that the applicants are under a lot more stress nowadays because they're more concerned about their livelihood than anything else, and then they know that any of these things that get in their way, a timeline, something not coming back, right? It's whether they have something out there or not, they're still concerned if they're making a transition from one position to another, that's smooth. And to be quite honest, if you think about it, that's their first interaction with a new company, whether it's Ingram Micro, whoever they're going to work for. First interaction is that process and how refined that process is. And it tells a lot about where they're going to go to work and the culture and the people and whatever else. But whether it's any part of the verification, any part of the background screening process is working with that applicant to make sure that they understand the process and they're up to speed on the timeline. Anything that can be done to assist with that really helps them to understand what it's going to be like going to work for that company and really starts them off on the right foot, right?
100%. And it is all about the candidate experience. So if I go back and say it's a candidate-led market, if they have a bad experience, regardless if you're using a third-party provider, and by the way, if you're using a third-party provider, they need to know what your process is like, right? Because they're an extension of your team. Even though the candidates maybe not interacting very one-on-one with them, they're working very closely with the organization. But your partner needs to understand what you're trying to accomplish. You can't just say, "Oh, it's on the provider. I don't know what's." Nobody's throwing anyone under the bus. We're working together, and at the end of the day, you want this whole process to be like air. Quite frankly, right? It's a seamless process and it's a smooth process. You want the candidate to go through that regardless of background check, your offer letter process, the onboarding. They feel so awesome that, wow, this was such a smooth, organized process. And wow, I have so much information about this organization. I'm ready to join day one. And you'll be surprised if you can get that all lined up. And maybe you have a snafu on day one where your IT or your computer doesn't show up on time, whatever. Sometimes that kind of goes to the wayside because they had such a great experience coming in that that was nothing we could do to fix that problem, for instance, or whatever the case is. So the more you do up front, you want that person to start off on the best foot when they come in.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that, again, there's so many obstacles and there's so many concerns in the hiring process that anytime that they just feel like it's buttoned up, that they're going to just, again, it stops them. I always say, why are people abandoning the process? It's either they're concerned about their background, they're concerned about where they're going, or maybe they receive another offer. And so you got to lay that foundation so that they will stick with you if something goes wrong. Like if that verification for their education in Europe is going to take an extra 5 days, they're not going to bail on you, right? Because you spend a lot of time and effort to get them into your funnel and recruitment and getting them to onboarding. It's costly not to finish the process out well. Well, Greg, before we let you go, I guess, you guys are looking to hire and recruitment, maybe put out a plug for Ingram Micro and what you guys are looking for. And if someone needed to connect with you or your team regarding any open positions or any opportunities, where would they go?
Perfect. Well, obviously, Tim, I've enjoyed the conversation. We should probably do part two. There's so many things we can dive in. I give you surface level, answers, and there's different areas we can focus a lot in. But, I always promote Ingram Micro. That's the company I've worked with. It's going on 10 years now. Careers.ingrammicro.com to find all of our opportunities. We have a global job board there. So anywhere around the world, if your listeners are outside the U.S., in the U.S., we have major sites in various different cities. And then obviously, that Ingram Micro is a hybrid work environment. So there are maybe opportunities out there where you can work remote. But we have a lot of opportunities. I'm not going to go through all of them. We're talking hundreds of openings and then thousands globally. So if you have an interest and passion and want to work with one of the largest technology distributors in the world, then have a look at Ingram Micro.
Awesome. And we'll definitely provide a link down in the show notes below so that people can get there if they're having trouble. But Greg, thanks so much for coming on Background Screening Tips and Tech. Appreciate your time and sharing your insights with our listeners today.
My pleasure, Tim.